Assistant Coach.
Good evening. Welcome to the City of Lebanon Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, Monday, February 7th, 2022. We have roll call, please.
Mark Vanneman.
Here.
Chad Kiger.
Here.
Bruce Pauley.
Here.
Ron Edwards.
Here.
Lori Gross. Here.
Everybody here tonight. Has everybody looked at the minutes from the last meeting? Any questions? If not, I'd like a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Our old business tonight is a public hearing for a property, was docket number 22-1, Richard Pinola requesting a development standard variance for the minimum lot size required to subdivide the parcel located at 1024 North Lebanon Street, and the other half of it would be 201 West Essex Street. The property is zoned multifamily. Ben?
Good evening, board members. I'm going to apologize now. I got this nagging cough that gets worse when I talk, so glad we have a 6-item agenda tonight because it's going to be real fun. So I'm going to do my best to struggle through these and not cough too much. First off tonight, we have a property located at 1024 North Lebanon Street, 201 West Essex Street. This is an existing developed property that's zoned multifamily. And this is kind of a unique parcel here. It is an existing, legally existing non-conforming parcel in that, they pull up the screen here, you can see there are two single-family homes, or two primary structures located on this property. If this were to be developed today, there would only be one permitted. So it is non-conforming because these have both been here for a long period of time. So we've got a non-conforming parcel, we've got two primary structures on one property. And talking with the property owner, he's trying to look at some alternatives to try to create basically two lots out of this. So each structure is on its own lot to allow him some flexibility in terms of maybe selling one, keeping the other, or anything like that. And also correcting the non-conforming situation where we have two structures on one lot. The challenge here is that in order to create two lots, there is just no way to create two lot sizes that meet our minimum lot size standards. So here we're looking at a situation where we're trying to correct one issue and thus creating an issue where we need a variance. So we try to do it best as possible, try to create a conforming parcel here as best we can. Work with the property owner, he had it surveyed. Let me pull up that survey here to try to figure out the best way to plat this. I'm going to have to, let's see, rotate this view and then zoom in. To try to create the best situation possible when platting these lots, understanding that we're not going to be able to meet the lot size requirements, but trying to make sure everything meets the setbacks appropriately. You got an adequate amount of property for both lots. So this is what was drawn up. What they essentially did is they drew a property boundary that made sure that the closest structures to that property line are equidistant from that property line. So you got something where the primary structure on the front lot is about a little less than 13 and a half feet from that property line, and then the garage associated with that second primary structure is about 13, it's that same 13 and a half feet. So we did our best to make sure that everything was split appropriately, but in terms of the size requirements, the minimums in the multifamily zoning district for a two-bedroom unit, for example, are 5,000 square feet. Here you got one lot size that's just a little under 3,000 square feet, and the other that's about 4,400 square feet. So the lot size does not accommodate the lot sizes. So we're not necessarily changing anything about how the lot's developed or what's going on the lot. Everything in terms of what you see on the lot will stay exactly the same. What the property is looking to do is try to split these into two lots so that you got each primary structures on its own individual lot. So then the request in this case would be to allow the lot sizes smaller than what's permitted in terms of the minimums, and that's the variance request. We have provided in the staff report and for the record responses to the 3 criteria associated with a variance request, and have, in terms of staff recommendation, recommended approval of the development standards variance request to permit relief from the lot size requirement of the UDO. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I guess there's no questions at this point. Thank you. Is Mr. Pinola here?
Yes.
would you care to step forward and address? Yes, please. A little information about the property if you can.
Yeah, I've owned it since 2003, and the two properties were there when I bought it. I've always rented it, and probably for the last 10 years, I've rented it to Boone County Mental Health. I don't know that immediately I would want to sell off either one. It's just always been funky that I've had two properties that are on the same parcel like that. So going forward, it would just give me more flexibility if I ever did want to sell one to split them. So that was just my goal.
How many bedrooms does the big house have, or the main house?
3.
The Lebanon Street house.
3,
And how many in the little one?
1.
Questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Would anybody from the audience care to say anything? We'll close the public end of the hearing. Questions for Ben or anything?
I don't.
Okay, then look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve docket 22-1 as written with the staff recommendations.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Mark Vanneman,
Aye.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Bruce Polly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross. Aye.
Motion passed. Congratulations. Get into the new business now. Docket number 22-4 is the first item. And it's Shambaugh and Sons, LP, requesting the White Castle Systems, representing the White Castle Systems, requesting a development standard variance to construct a structure for refrigeration equipment. The property is located at 1506 West Main Street here in Lebanon, and is zoned in the industrial district and is in the thoroughfare overlay district. Ben?
All right, this is a project that White Castle Systems is looking at. They need some new, to add some refrigeration equipment to an accessory structure. If you pull up this site plan, the accessory structure will sit approximately in this corner of the existing parking lot. We have done a review with them to ensure that they're going to be maintaining the correct number of parking spaces for their employees, and they do meet that. But the issue here is that the ordinance would suggest that accessory structures have a maximum height of 18 feet. And I'll let them explain it because they can probably explain it better, but due to the existing equipment in the building and where the piping for the refrigeration equipment needs to be in terms of elevation, they need to be taller than 18 feet. So in order for them to actually be able to provide the equipment at the proper height, they need a little bit taller than 18 feet in order to provide that equipment. So that's the request here. And they've essentially looked at this building and made it just tall enough to be able to provide the equipment in the building, the lighting, and systems above it. So they're not asking for anything excessive here. They're really keeping it as short as they can, at the same time providing the proper elevation for that equipment related to the system piping. And that would result in a building that's approximately 21 feet tall, about 3 feet taller, and it would be just tall enough to house that piping in the correct elevation. So they are requesting a variance from that maximum permitted height of 18 feet in order to build an accessory structure that is approximately 21 feet tall in order to house that refrigeration equipment on the site. We have, for the record, provided responses to the 3 criteria for a variance in terms of the findings. And with that, then, the staff has recommended approval of the development standard variance request to allow an increase in the maximum height of an accessory structure. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I think it's pretty self-explaining. I think no questions. Is somebody from White Castle Systems in the audience? You want to step forward and tell a little bit about it?
Sure. Mike, do it.
Good evening. My name is Mike Young with Shambo & Son, and White Castle has asked us to construct an accessory building to house some new refrigeration equipment for the process of the facility. And in order for us to do that properly, due to the existing refrigeration lines in the existing building, we have to come out of the top of those lines, go between the two buildings, and then again step up in the new building. So in order to do that and to pitch everything properly so that the system works correctly, a building of 18 feet would not work. We need an extra like 2.5 feet, so it comes out roughly 21 feet when it's all said and done to properly pitch the lines from the new equipment back to the existing equipment and give us room for lighting, sprinklers, insulation, and hangers to properly hang all the equipment in that new space. It's 1,000 square foot space, and we kept the 21.6 height at the very minimum we could when designing the new structure. So we're asking for the variance in order to everything work out properly and work properly when it's installed.
Questions? Thank you, sir. Go ahead and sit down.
Pardon?
You can go ahead and sit down. This is a public hearing. If anybody from the audience cares to say anything, please step forward. Okay, we'll close the public end of this docket. If there's no other questions, look for a motion.
Make a motion to approve docket 22-4 as written.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Kelly?
Mark Bannerman.
Aye.
Chad Kiger.
Aye.
Bruce Pauly.
Aye.
Ron Edwards.
Aye.
Lori Gross. Aye.
Passes. Good luck. Next item on the docket is docket 22-5, Patterson, excuse me, Patterson Street Partners LLC requesting 3 development standards. Variances to construct a new building located at 320 North Patterson Street. The property is in the industrial district. Ben?
A couple of things up here so we can kind of explain the history of this. This is actually a very exciting project. While the project itself, in terms of it being an industrial building, may not be super sexy, the fact that for those of us who know the history of this site, should be pretty excited about what's going on here. So I'm going to pull up some previous aerials for this site here so you kind of see what this site has kind of gone through in terms of iterations over the last few years. I think the first time we met the applicant on this project, gosh, it's probably been 3 or 4 years ago now, first time we talked about this site. For those that know, this was a significant brownfield site. This is an old industrial building that was used during World War II to make bomb casings for World War II. It's been used since then for other things that were highly corrosive materials. This was a very bad environmental site, and both from you had 2 things going on. You had a massive building on the site, but then it also, from the environmental perspective, was a really challenging site. So we found a great partner in the applicant who was willing to take on the task of being able to demolish and get rid of this site, and then also try to correct the environmental issues. So they've gone to significant expense to do both the demo and the environmental cleanup, and now we're trying to figure out exactly how to reuse this site in something that would be effective, a good project for the community, and also effective for them from a financial perspective. And what they're looking at here is to do a speculative industrial building, but I guess maybe I should show you the pictures first. So this is a picture that's a couple years old. This kind of shows you the old building that was on the site. It actually was built right out on Patterson Street. The zero setback was right on the sidewalk. It was right along the old railroad right away that's now the Big 4 Trail, and really took up the entire site. They had a small parking area here at the northeast corner of the building and some additional, it probably could count as parking around the building, but that was primary utility area. So the building really took up the entire site. The other challenge with this site that this is a regulated drain to the north of the building. And for anything newly constructed, you have a regulated drain easement that's 75 feet from the top of the bank, so there's some restrictions there. And also for those that are in the know that have worked with the utilities before, our main trunk line to our sanitary sewer, this treatment plant goes directly underneath this building, east-west through this site, directly underneath the building, which is usually frowned upon to have a large building like this over top of the main trunk line going to your sanitary sewer plant. So we had a number of challenges working both from cleaning up this site, but then also to figure out how to most effectively redevelop it. You can see here, this is probably the closest approximation to the existing condition of the site. You can see there's some of the foundation still remaining there, but in essence, the building's been removed. There are still some piles of torn up, concrete and gravel that are still being cleaned up. But for the most part, they've done the full demo on that building and got it just about ready to start construction of the new facility. And as I said, they're looking to construct a new speculative industrial building. I'll pull up the site plan now so you can kind of see that. It's about a 45,000 square foot speculative industrial building. They've got some employee parking on the north and south sides of the building. They've created kind of a truck court back behind it with dock doors, again, putting the front of the building facing out to Patterson Street. They are making sure that the sanitary line is not obstructed by a building, and then they're also staying out of that regulated drain easement. So they are doing a number of things to really correct some of the issues with this site. At the same time, though, this site is zoned general industrial, the ID district, and has significant setbacks associated with it. 100-foot setback, 100-foot front setbacks, 50-foot side setbacks. But if you look and see the building space that's left after those setbacks, and the fact that there's also residential uses with buffer yards associated, you really are left with very little property to actually build a building on when you look at those significant setbacks. So what we did is work with the applicant to try to figure out what made the most sense here. Still creating some buffer yard areas to provide some protection to some of those uses around it, but then also creating an effective site plan for them to be able to develop this site and give them a building of a size appropriate to do that. This is the result you see here, but it does have a few setback or a few variances associated with setbacks that are necessary with the way this building sits. So the first one is a building front setback on Patterson Street. So what we have here is kind of a combination issue here. So this is the ID district across the street from a residential district, which requires a 25-foot buffer yard along Patterson Street. In addition to that, on a 25-foot buffer yard, there would be 100-foot setback for a total of 125-foot building setback, which would put us somewhere in the middle of the property before they can even start constructing the building. Really, when you look at, both placing a building and then also placing the parking and truck access, that essentially you really couldn't build anything on this site. So what we work with them here is to, rather than, you recall that aerial photography of the old building where the building was right on the sidewalk, what they have done here is pulled that building back so that they can both provide necessary right-of-way along Patterson Street, which doesn't exist now, in case we ever need to make any improvements, but also provide that 25-foot buffer yard in front of the building. So the building effectively sets back, I think it's about 40 or so feet from where the building was sat before, which will provide a much better buffer yard out front there. But what that does, though, is where they have the building set, technically the building is at a 0 front setback. It's provided the 25 feet for the buffer yard, but a 0 front setback for the building. So they are requesting a variance to allow the building to have a front setback of 0 feet, which again, like as I said, effectively it's about 40 feet further back than it was before, but when you technically apply our ordinance, it has a 0 setback for the front building. But we do think that this is a much more effective solution here, pulling the building back a little bit, providing that buffer area in the front, but still providing them the ability to build effectively on this site. The second one is a side setback. Along the south property line, there is a 25-foot buffer yard that's applied due to its location adjacent to the Big Four Trail. And again, so you got 25 feet plus the 50-foot setback, which again significantly restricts the site on this south property line if they were to apply that as the way the ordinance is written. So again, we have worked with them to allow some variation from that. Right now, they're proposing it's 47 feet from the south property line, the corner of that building. So you effectively then have the 25-foot buffer plus a 22-foot side setback. So it's representing a reduction about 28 feet from where it should be. But again, we're looking at being able to provide a significant buffer along the Big Four Trail with landscaping. They do have access around the building, which they'd be required to do for fire department access anyway. So really what you see here is really the corner of the building, about 50 feet or so from the property line, and then the drive access around the building. So again, it's a reduction on that side setback. The third one is that the buffer yard along the south property line. So coupled with that, the way the buffer yards are written, you can't put any improvements other than landscaping in that. So no pavement, no building, anything. So what we have here is a case where this drive aisle, to make it a 24-foot drive aisle around the building, it did have to encroach slightly into that buffer yard. So it's encroaching, excuse me, in addition to that, there's a 5-foot parking setback. So that would need to be sitting back about 30 feet from the property lines before you can start the parking. And what we have here is a situation where you've got about 19 feet from the property line to that drive aisle. So they are encroaching into the buffer yard setback about 6 feet. But again, we thought it was much more important to make sure that we stayed away from the sanitary line and away from the regulated drainage on the north end. And given it's the trail use along there, we felt like it was appropriate, these were appropriate setbacks, knowing that they're going to be able to provide a fairly extensive landscape buffer along this south property line. So we felt like this was an appropriate solution for them to be able to use the site most effectively, understanding the restrictions both from the sanitary line, the regulated drain, and just the size of the property, and the significant setbacks are required of the ID zoning district. So with that, again, I won't go through all of the findings of fact for each of the 3 variances, but we have, for the record, they are provided in the staff report. And let me make sure I don't have any conditions. I did not have any conditions of approval. So with that, then staff has recommended approval of each of the 3 development standards variances. 1 to permit relief from the front setback, second one to permit relief from the south side setback, and the third to provide some relief from the buffer yard setback on the south side. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I think we're good, thank you.
Is the owner present?
Good evening. My name's Adam Dehart. I'm project manager for Keeler Webb Associates. Our offices are located at 486 Gradle Drive, Carmel, Indiana. With me here this evening is Mr. Reed Litwack and Mr. Steve Henshaw, the owners of Patterson Street Partners, that are looking to develop this property. Ben did a thorough job of going through things. I was going to highlight a couple items here. I've blown up his plan here. I wanted to show a couple things to orient you to the site. I believe some of this was in your package. Property's bounded on the north by Prairie Creek. As all of us know that live here, every time it rains we get that special whistle because of the issues with the floodplain there. We met with a big group of engineers in December that represented the city of Lebanon, Boone County Sheriff's Office, and their consultants to put together a plan that would work with all the different jurisdictions involved in that floodplain. One of the things that the surveyor's office was interested in maintaining was the 75-foot setback from the top of the bank, which follows this dash line through the site. Because it's a legal drain, they want to keep that area clear of trees, improvements, buildings and so forth, so in the event that the floodwaters do come, there's nothing there to obstruct it or cause a downstream issue. When you're looking at the plan, the actual floodway, the area that's under the jurisdiction of the DNR, is in the blue hatched area, and that follows in between the surveyor easement and the top of the bank on the creek. The property line actually goes to the approximate center line of the creek when they split the property and it was separated from the Prairie Industries. Spitznagel owns the property to the north of us, and then we have the Patterson Street Bridge that's still in place in good condition at the northeast corner of the site. As a part of the demolition project, there were probably 2 bridges that were taken out. Again, that's something that the county surveyor is very happy about, the local engineer, because it's something that in the event of a large storm could have ended up downstream. It was in horrible condition, and that's been removed as a part of the demolition project, so everybody's very pleased and happy about that. Another thing that impacts the site is the 100-year elevation for the floodway, and that's in this light, that's demonstrated in this light gray area. That light gray area extends into the floodway, of course, and that all follows along the bank of Prairie Creek on the north side of our project. The county surveyor is going to work with us. The previous site had entry drive right off the edge of the bridge, immediately, literally connected right to the edge of the bridge. He's going to work with us so we can have access around that side and give us a non-encroachment so we can have our north entrance, so we can have two ways in and out of the facility, which works well for the function of the facility and fire protection and access. We're going to improve that existing curb cut entrance, pull it back off the bridge a little bit, and remove and replace sidewalks in that area that were in horribly bad condition, primarily because the old building was out to and into the right-of-way right at the back of the walk. Coming down Patterson Street, in front of the building, we have the North Street intersection. That existing sidewalk, again, was literally at the edge of the asphalt coming down along there. We're going to take that out, reconstruct that curb line. There's some storm sewer in there that we'll be working on, where we'll make our connections to our storm system and repairing those structures that are in bad condition, and then replacing with an all-new walk that will come down along Patterson Street and connect into the Big 4 Trail, which was recently built. The Big 4 Trail is completely along our south property line, runs at an angle, which again contributes to the development of the property. As you gentlemen have probably recognized, most of your large industrial buildings like to have rectangular shapes, and every time you start putting angles and dents and weird angles in there, it cuts down on your area that you can actually develop on the property. I've tried to represent what would be left. Excuse me. This isn't my laptop, so bear with me here for just a second. Then on the drawings, what we've done is represent what would be left over for development if we followed the zoning ordinance strictly, and if we follow the red setback line on the rear, and then on the side yard, and then back up the front yard, and then where the surveyor has his area that he doesn't want us to disturb, you end up with about 1 acre and 3/4 on a 5-acre site. You know, it makes the property almost virtually undevelopable, and we've worked with staff to try to come up with this plan that we feel is a nice fit that's somewhere in between. The site functions well, it accomplishes what we need to do, and then it still keeps everybody's concerns intact. We fully intend, even though we're asking for these variances of these large setback yards, to install every single piece of landscaping that's required in that buffer yard in that remaining buffer yard area on the east and the south side, so we can be a good neighbor. We can screen the industrial use and any outdoor storage. Our truck yard and all that is at the rear of the building. We've designed it that way to get away from the residences. So essentially, the thing that the residences will see on the east side of the street is a brand new building, and that's just about it. All the parking has been designed to be on the sides of the building, again, away from the residential, so we can keep all of our uses away from them in an effort to be a good neighbor. All said and done, with the remediation that we've done on the site to date, the demolition of the existing building, the bridges, and the construction of this project will represent about a $7 million investment into the community. This is being done on a speculative nature. There's no building of this size that's available in Boone County, according to Boone County Economic Development, and there's a real need because everybody needs buildings, houses, and property to move into. There's a need for this size facility. We felt relatively confident as soon as we get it built, somebody will be knocking on our door to occupy the building and bring in more jobs into the community. Another thing that we're doing on this site that wasn't done before, all the stormwater before on a 180,000 square foot building was literally just dumped free for all into Prairie Creek. which that's why our sirens go off all the time, is because stormwater management wasn't a major priority in many years past. And the way the city's developed, it has created the large floodplain in the area. As a part of the project, in compliance with the stormwater ordinance, we're going to install a water quality swale along the west side of the property, which is going to allow us to be in compliance with county and city standards and the stormwater ordinance so that we can clean our stormwater before it leaves the site. So again, we're doing something beyond more than what was there originally, and we've had to work with all these different jurisdictions to work out all those rules because of the county and the city both being involved in this. We concur with the staff's findings as far as their report and their findings of fact. And in conclusion here, I just want to mention that because this is a brownfield project and the property remediation and demolition along with the real estate improvements, we feel that they'll improve the site, the street, the right-of-way. The redevelopment will provide new jobs, enhance the tax base in the community, and not be a burden to the city or the school district. There's a substantial investment in the property, including the remediation, demolition, and real estate improvements that will likely increase the value of this property and subsequently the property surrounding this property. And finally, this site is particularly burdened by the pre-existing condition of the buildings, the Prairie Creek floodway, flood fringe, and Prairie Creek regulated drain easements that we have to comply with. And due to the current zoning classification, there are substantial building setbacks which affect the ability to maximize the redevelopment of the site. With that, myself and the owners will be available for any questions you or the public may have.
Do I have any questions?
I have a question for Ben.
Ben?
Ben, just curious about the zoning of this area. It seems like it's not fit for industrial use in terms of all of our classifications for industrial zoning and all the setbacks. And it seems like just the zoning in itself creates a hardship for that particular parcel. Was it grandfathered in because of its previous use? Is that why it was classified as industrial?
I have to look historically. My guess is because that's property's been an industrial building since before any of us were around, that it's been zoned industrial for a long time. So we've got a couple areas of town that are kind of like that, where this probably used to be on the edge of town, right by the railroad tracks. So you've got some of these historic industrial areas that were on the edge of town that now, as the town grew, became kind of part of town. So it's been zoned industrial since, probably the 30s or 40s when this building was originally constructed. And so it's kind of a pre-existing. You got a similar situation kind of southwest of downtown or west, where you got the similar area that's also zoned the ID district, where you've really got a mix of uses in the area, some of which are residential uses in the industrial district too. So we're kind of dealing with this in other areas too. So in this case, it's been zoned this way for a long time. We're looking for kind of a solution that kind of works best for what we're dealing with here.
Has the discussion about rezoning that area ever come up?
I think a couple things. The only thing, because of the environmental condition of the site, it really can't be anything other than industrial.
Okay.
So the only thing really could rezone it to is planned business industrial, and this use that they're proposing would fit there too. The setbacks would be a little bit different, but they probably would still need some variances just with the buffers plus the setbacks. So we looked at, because it's on the trail, do we do something other than industrial?
Right.
When you look at those environmental issues out there, it could never be something residential out there. So this is really looking at kind of the highest and best use and best case scenario, what we as a city could work with the applicant to come up with, and this is where we landed.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Ben, can you remind me what the landscape requirements would be in that buffer area?
Yeah, so in that, like along Patterson Street, it would be, I believe it's 8 trees and 15 shrubs every 100 feet, plus a berm or wall, because it's industrial adjacent to a residential. So it's a very substantial buffer yard. So we'll be working with them to figure out best way to apply that standard in there, but it is a substantial buffer yard.
Okay, good deal. Ben, can you remind me what the landscape requirements would be in that buffer area? Yeah, so in that, like along Patterson Street, it would be, I believe it's 8 trees and 15 shrubs every 100 feet, plus a berm or wall, because it's industrial adjacent to a residential. So it's a very substantial buffer yard. But it's a substantial buffer yard. Okay, good deal.
Anybody else?
Good.
Thank you. Being a public meeting, I'll open it to the public if anybody cares to address the board. I'll close the public portion of the meeting. If there's no other questions for anybody, we'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance request to permit relief from buffer setback requirements of the UDO.
I'll second that.
Mark Vanneman,
Aye.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Bruce Pelly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross. Aye.
Congratulations, good luck.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Daniel Hoffman, docket number 22-6 is the next item, requesting a development standard variance to construct a decorative wall in the front yard. Property is located at 100 Smith Street, Lebanon. The property is zoned planned business commercial and is in the thoroughfare overlay district. Matt. This
Good evening,
yours?
Board. I'm going to give Ben's voice a break for a second, but I am suffering from the same cough that he has, so forgive me in advance. What we have here, as some of you have seen in the packet, we have that sports bar, which is located technically on Smith Street, but is situated between State Road 32 South Street and Main Street there along the railroad tracks. The applicant, the property owner, is looking to make some significant investments and improvements to the outdoor seating and entertaining area. They had a previously existing area, as you can see from the image here on the screen. Let me zoom in just a little bit more. They had an existing privacy fence and outdoor patio area just on the north side of the property. They are looking to replace that privacy fence and concrete patio area with a stone paver and a 5-foot-high stone, landscape stone wall around that outdoor section. What makes this unique and requires the variance is that this property technically has 3 frontages. We've got Main Street, Smith Street, and State Road 32. Our Unified Development Ordinance requires front yard fences, our fence standards, to have a maximum height of 48 inches and must be 50% opaque, meaning you must be able to see through half of it. And really what that's designed for is for visibility for driving at intersections. So you don't block the visibility of drivers on those corners or any intersections. So because of that, because they do have 3 frontages, and this, what would typically be considered the back of the building, is technically the front, we have to get the variance on those fence standards. So again, the applicant is looking to build a 5-foot-tall stone wall, completely solid of landscape block to allow that privacy of the patrons within the establishment, and then the height of the wall would be 5 feet versus the allowable 48 inches, 4 feet that our development standard allows. In the staff report, we went through the variances, the evaluation standards, and again, just quickly, this variance would not be injurious to the public health, safety, welfare, or morals of the community. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property would not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. And then lastly, the strict application of the terms of the UDO would result in practical difficulties on this property because of those 3 frontages, as I've mentioned. So staff recommendation is for the approval of the variance request to permit a 5-foot landscape block wall located in the front yard, but subject to the following condition: that the applicant install landscape bedding, including new tree and shrub plantings along the north perimeter wall to provide further screening along that Main Street frontage. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
I got one, I guess it's just for my peace of mind, but I always thought that, I guess the Postal Service is the one that establishes the address as the front, but there's 3 here. Is it just because of being on a street, facing a street, or?
Yeah, it's absolutely just because it faces 3 frontages. As you can see, you've got Main Street going along the north. It technically has a Smith Street address, which is to the east there, but it technically doesn't have a backyard because it fronts on 3 different streets. So if you think about a home typically just fronts on one street in front of it, or a business fronts on one street. Our downtown businesses have just one frontage. This particular lot has 3 frontages, which you've seen before. I think we've had a few variances come before you where something may have 2, where they have a frontage in the front and rear. This one's unique in that it has 3. I don't know of many properties around our community that would actually have 3 frontages. And one thing, I'm sorry, I will pull up here. We do have a rendering of what they're proposing here, and the applicant and or the designer are more than welcome to expand on this. Flip it over here for you. So you can kind of see here. So that's the existing patio area. They're looking to, again, replace the entire section with new pavers, a nice fire pit, and then the 5-foot tall block wall around the exterior of it. And again, this is replacing a privacy fence, a 6-foot tall privacy fence that was previously existing there.
Any other questions?
What's the history of the property? Does it have something to do with the railroad?
Yeah, I think at one point, a very long time ago, it was an actual depot, a stop. I believe there was stairs leading up to the tracks there. This property has undergone many different ownerships throughout the past. I think many of us that have been around. I think it used to be called the Depot at one point. It's been a restaurant, it's been bar, and I wish I could give when it was built and all that kind of fun stuff, but it does have some railroad history to it, but it's currently being used as a restaurant and bar and grill.
Other questions? Thank you, Matt.
No problem.
Would the owner care to step forward, please?
Hello, I'm Danielle. We're just trying to make this place better. I bought the building in October. I've had it for 3 years, and we've consistently grown the business 20% each year. And with that, I just want to make it a better place. We're actually working on making this patio family-friendly, which I know the city needs more family-friendly places to eat. So that's all I'm trying to do is, and I know this is going to add value to the building and the areas surrounding it as well.
Any questions?
Are you planning on having any outside activities, bands or anything?
Mm-hmm. We're building a stage. And I also think by having the brick wall will be better than having that wooden fence for any kind of noise ordinance issues. But the bands are scheduled till 10 o'clock, so we don't really have many noise ordinance issues anymore. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Once again, it says a public hearing. Would anybody from the audience care to step forward? We'll close the public end of the hearing. If there's no further questions.
One other quick item that I might
Okay.
mention. I was speaking with the applicant's designer before the meeting, and actually, because they're serving alcohol outside, the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission also will regulate the height of that wall. They have requirements in terms of being inside versus outside the space where alcohol is served, and so some of that height is being dictated by Alcohol and Tobacco Commission as well. So that is part of the reason why it's 5 feet as well. And it may actually
Excuse me,
get
Ben.
taller depending on how the ATC responds. So
Do we have other places in Lebanon that serves alcohol outside?
we do, actually, the Chop House on the square does, in that area in the alley.
Okay.
That's one that off the top of my head, I can say that they do.
Thank you. Good.
Okay. We had the public hearing. No further questions. Any motion?
I make a motion to approve docket 22-6 as written.
Second.
Motion second. Kelly?
Mark Vanneman. Chad Kiger.
Aye.
Bruce Polly. Ron Edwards.
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Motion passes. Congratulations. Good luck.
I will say that you have a very good breakfast. Everybody should know that.
Yes, they do.
That'll make your sales go up 20% more.
Our next item is docket 22-7. It's John Lashley requesting 5 development standard variances to operate a retail nursery located at 911 Indianapolis Avenue. The property is zoned industrial district and in a thoroughfare overlay district.
Very good. So this is, if they want to pull up the site with the screen here, show you a little bit of the site. The address is 911 Indianapolis Avenue, which is actually True Finds address, which is on Indianapolis Avenue, but this project really encapsulates the area behind True Finds on Spencer Avenue that you see outlined generally here. We're working with the applicant for a few months now, and what they're looking at doing is providing a retail nursery, and it's something Lebanon really doesn't have right now, and providing a number of different services. One would be bulk landscape materials like mulch, stone, etc., and the other would be retail plants. And so a couple things come into play here. One, the site is zoned for it. This is another one of those sites that's zoned general industrial, like we were just talking about on an earlier application, where you kind of got a mix of industrial, commercial, and residential uses all in the same area. But the other thing that kind of adds a layer of review to this is it's also within the thoroughfare overlay district because it's off of Indianapolis Avenue. So we got some standards associated with that. The biggest thing is that outdoor storage is not permitted in the overlay district. And so because of the bulk landscape storage, while he does intend, and I'll pull up the rendering of what they're proposing in terms of improvements here in a second, they are proposing to provide basically landscape block stalls to enclose the piles of mulch, but they're still, without having 4 walls and a roof, it's still technically outdoor storage. So they are providing some screening for that and try to keep it contained in that area, but it's still technically outdoor storage. The other thing related to this application is that they'll have outdoor sales. So obviously all the retail plants are going to be outside as opposed to in a building. And they're actually, for this use specifically, there isn't a primary structure. This is all outdoor plant material, landscape material. There isn't a structure associated with this. So it's all outdoor sales, and we only permit a certain percentage of the total site. You know, if you've got a 5,000 square foot building, we allow a certain percentage of that for outdoor sales, where there is no primary structure here. So we're dealing with everything outdoors. So there are 5 variances here, but it's all associated with the fact that there's outdoor storage and outdoor display areas. So let me pull up now proposed site improvements here so you can kind of get an idea. So this is actually an aerial. This is Spencer Avenue you see here, and Indianapolis Avenue is kind of on the top of this picture. So you're kind of looking west from here. True Finds building is just off the screen to the left here, and this is the existing building that kind of sits up by the corner of the Chuck Hunt homes. And we did work with them. Initially they were planning on putting these stalls in the area where you see here on those retail plants, so they had it closer to Spencer Avenue. So we worked with them to try to figure out whether it would work, whether we could find a way to move the landscape materials further away from Spencer Avenue, so they were able to do that, and then essentially put the retail plants out along Spencer Avenue. This does look a little bit different here than what you see out there. Currently, this is all a gravel drive into this site. The applicant was working with the state to try to maintain that, but the drainage doesn't work very well in this area, and they were going to want a larger culvert out in this area that was going to be fairly costly. So actually, the applicant decided rather than trying to make those improvements, it made more sense to just go ahead and return this back to a landscape area and kind of reconstruct the ditch, the drainage ditch that kind of has been lost over time. So they'll actually be providing from the edge of pavement about a 20-foot depth that will be returned to landscape material. They'll provide an additional buffer screening that's required along Spencer Avenue. You see represented here with the evergreen trees. And then in essence, then you've got about 55 feet of landscape material that obviously will change over time, but in effect is another landscape buffer, if you will. And those are the improvements they're planning right now. They do have plans for something much larger over time that they're working through the details. This would kind of be the initial phase of their operation out here that you see some retail plants, retail nursery plants, and then the bulk landscape materials. And then obviously recreating the buffer along Spencer Avenue there. And so that's the project in a nutshell. And again, there are 5 variances. The first is for outdoor storage, variance for outdoor storage. Again, as I mentioned, the Thoroughfare Overlay District does not permit outdoor storage, and so they've asked for relief from that requirement to allow the installation of the enclosures for the bulk landscape materials. The second is a thoroughfare corridor buffer, which is 20 feet along Spencer Avenue. And again, they are providing 20 feet, but it's 25 feet from the edge of pavement, not from the property line. There's probably about 10 feet that is actually from the property line to where the retail nursery material starts. And again, one of the other challenges here is, as I had the site up before, it's not very deep. So really, if they were to provide that full 20 feet, that would take up about a third of the depth of this property. So again, it's really limiting how you can place things. We really felt like with those landscape, kind of putting the retail nursery materials in there, rather than the bulk material storage, that we're in effect providing a larger distance from the outdoor storage. So effectively, we're providing that buffer. But they will provide a 10-foot buffer where there is no buffer right now. This is essentially all gravel through here, so it is an improvement from what you see. So they are requesting relief from that 20-foot buffer to allow them to put a 10-foot buffer with landscaping in there. The third is the display area paving. So any outdoor sales area is required to be paved. In essence here, they're going to be creating an area. This is all gravel now. And what they'll do is they'll maintain the gravel where it exists, and certainly where you've got retail nursery plants, it actually makes more sense to have something that's a pervious surface when you're watering things that doesn't puddle up or run across the property. So they'll be maintaining a pervious surface some way on this entire property as opposed to paving it. So they are requesting relief to maintain the existing gravel that you see there now. The fourth one is then for the maximum area of outdoor sales. Again, I mentioned earlier, we allow a maximum of 10% of the principal structure for outdoor sales. And again, as I mentioned, there is no principal structure to associate with this. So you're requesting relief from that 10% maximum. And then the last one is storage in required yards. So again, you're not allowed to put your storage in or the sales display areas within a required front yard. And again, with this site, it's a very narrow site. It's actually, again, we talked about having multiple frontages. It's kind of sandwiched between Indianapolis Avenue and Spencer Avenue, so everything out here is a front yard that you see in this area associated with any of the buildings. So they are requesting relief from that storage in required yards to allow them to have the outdoor storage in the area that was located on the plan. So those are the 5 variance requests. And again, for the record, we have findings for all the 3 criteria for each of those 5 variance requests in the staff report. And we do have a couple of conditions in here. We have recommended approval of all 5 variance requests, and there are 2 conditions in here. One, that the applicant install a landscape buffer along Spencer Avenue to include an evergreen tree planting every 15 feet. So again, I mentioned there would be that 10-foot buffer along Spencer Avenue. We're requesting they install evergreen tree planting every 15 feet in that buffer. And then the second condition is that the applicant restrict use of the property within 20 feet of the Spencer Avenue property line to only retail plant material sales. No bulk material storage can be located any closer than 20 feet to that property line. And I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
That area going to be fenced, Ben?
That's not my understanding. It would not be fenced. They'll provide that evergreen landscape buffer along Spencer Avenue, but the remainder of it will be open. And access to the site would be from Indianapolis Avenue through Truefine's site. There would be no access to the site from Spencer Avenue like there is now.
Okay.
And what is that house/building right next to the storage area being used for? I drive by it all the time, but I guess I never pay attention. Like, is that,
I don't, maybe the applicant can answer that question. Yeah, Chuck Hunt bought the property. He probably uses it for storage, and he's got a couple of trailers and or trucks he parks there, but I don't know. Other than that, I'm not sure exactly what he
the only
uses.
reason I ask, I mean, that looks like that wall's like right up on it. I didn't know if there's any restrictions to having a wall. I mean, I don't know what the distance between the wall and the actual property line that's being used, if there's any.
Yeah, I think so.
issues
So
with-
it's relatively close to that building.
Right.
And actually, in this case, so this project will actually use both part of Truefine's property and part of that Chuck Hunt property. So they actually had to get permission from both property owners because they actually do extend into that property boundary a little bit in that corner by the building.
Okay.
So they do have permission from both property owners to do the project you see here.
Pull the picture back up. So access into the property is through the adjacent property's parking lot?
Yes, yeah, so this is
Okay.
actually, they're not purchasing this property right now, it'll be maintained in Truefine's ownership. So they would be blocking access from Spencer Avenue and building this landscape buffer. Primarily, again, this NDOT had some significant improvements that they were gonna require in order to allow that to continue to be used for access. So it made more sense for the applicant to go ahead and just restore the buffer along here, and it will be accessed from Indianapolis Avenue through Truefine's site.
So this isn't a separate parcel, this is
It
additions
is-
to an existing?
Yeah, it is technically a separate parcel, but it is all under the same ownership.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. John, you want to step forward?
Good evening, Board. I can answer Mark's question, also Chad's question a little bit better in regards to the actual building itself. We are going to go into a 3-year lease at this time, and that building that you're referring to will actually be my office. We're going to redesign the inside of it at this point and use it more for an office than where we're at right now. My son's coming on the company in May, and at that point, he's going to be down in Noble Street. We're kind of separated. So he's going to be down on Noble Street, and then I'm going to be down at this facility. To answer your question, Chad, in regards to the difference as far as the entrance, I have worked for Truefines going on 11 years now. I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm financially involved in it whatsoever, but I have been a helper or a partner per se with him for the whole time that he's been there. Our future goal is to purchase the property at the time that they're able or willing to sell. So we'd like to, JD and I's thoughts are to make it a kind of a destination, outdoor destination at some point. But that's down the road. It's kind of step one.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yep.
Being a public hearing, anybody from the audience care to please step forward and state your name?
My name's Arthur McCown. I own the property at 1006 Noble Street, which is right by that property they're talking about. And nobody's even come and asked me about it, or asked me any questions. And I don't know, but it looks like it is infringing on some of my property. So I don't know what to say or what to do, but it just seems strange that all of a sudden I get a letter in the mail saying they're going to do this development right next door to me, and nobody's talked to me about it. And so if you can put the picture back up, maybe I can, or not this particular picture, but So where the yellow square line is I believe my property, you can see the side of my house there. I think my property goes straight over to the street. And so there's a triangle in that rectangle on the end there that belongs to me. So.
I don't believe we're talking
I
about
can't,
the same place.
it looks to me like it kind of on an angle back. Ben, do you want to address it? Okay.
So.
Do you have anything else?
I'm just curious because, all of a sudden, they're talking about doing these big changes, and I've been told that I can't do any changes. And, I'm not against it or anything, I just don't like being left in the dark about it. So, I'd like to know exactly, are they infringing on my property or not?
Well, I'll tell you, I have to close the public hearing and then Ben will come forward. You have anything else you want to say?
That was all I was asking, because,
Okay, well, have a seat.
I like the idea of having a nursery next door, but,
I understand.
I
but
guess I just felt
is
left
there-
out because I am the neighbor.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, is there anybody else that cares to say anything? Okay, we'll close the public end of the hearing and have Ben step back forward.
Yeah, so let me zoom in a little bit on this so you can kind of see the property lines a little bit better. So if they want to pull that back up, the gentleman just spoke, you can kind of see his property line comes up at an angle here. It gets to this point, and then it turns to the northeast here, and then it actually comes back down right here. So Truefine's property actually runs along this narrow strip along Spencer Avenue and then makes a turn right here and comes here. So that yellow line representing kind of the general extent of what we're talking about does not encroach on his property. And this is not an exact line, I'm just essentially trying to roughly show approximately what area is going to be used for this endeavor that the applicant is looking to do. But yeah, as you can see here, that his property line actually doesn't go straight up to Spencer Avenue. It actually makes a turn when it gets about right here and then comes back down. So he actually does not have frontage on Spencer Avenue. He doesn't own frontage on Spencer Avenue at all based on what you see here on the GIS on ownership. This is all owned by Truefine's LLC. Both the building, the site that the building is on, and then all this piece, and then wrapping down Spencer Avenue.
Finance people have asked me to buy that property from me, and they have not.
Okay.
That property line you're talking about?
All I can do is, this is based on the county records. The county records of who owns and pays taxes on this property says it's owned by Truefine's LLC.
Okay.
So in terms of notifications, in terms of what the city does, is once we've received an application, we send out notifications to the adjacent property owner. So he received the notification based on once we've received the application, we send it out. So the applicant may have some additional information about making contact with adjacent owners. But that, in terms of from the city's communications requirements, the letter he received is what we sent out once we received the application. We prepared those public notices.
Any questions? For motion?
I'll make a motion to approve docket 22-7 as written.
I second the motion.
Mark Banneman,
Before you probably want to make sure to highlight those two conditions.
Two conditions.
As part of the motion.
Including the two conditions, hang on, let me scroll down. One being that the applicant install landscaper buffer along Spencer Avenue to include evergreen tree planting every 15 feet. And number two, that the applicant restrict the use of the property within 20 feet of Spencer Avenue property line. No bulk material can be located any closer than 20 feet to said property line.
Okay, now I need a second.
And I second the motion.
Mark Banneman,
Aye.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Bruce Polly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Passes. Good luck. Our last item tonight, docket 22-8, Little Angels Daycare requesting a development standard variance to construct an addition to their property located on Hendricks Drive, 925 Hendricks Drive. Property is zoned plan, business, commercial.
All right, this is the Little Angels Daycare site that's located on Hendricks Drive. They are looking to do an addition to add some additional children's classrooms to the building, and this is the site you see here with their existing building and parking out front. They're looking to build an addition that runs to the south behind the building and then provide some additional employee parking along the side of the building. We have worked with them a little bit, and there is, again, a significant drainage ditch that runs along this east side of the property and overhead power lines that run along this property line. So again, trying to make sure we get the parking to fit here and provide the landscaping represented kind of a challenge here. And what we ran into, pull up the site plan here. And this actually represents the original proposal that they came in with showing landscaping. So the standards would suggest that the new parking area would have to meet our parking lot perimeter landscaping requirements, which include tree and shrub plantings. And so the edge, essentially that parking area that you see here with a 24-foot drive aisle and the appropriate size parking spaces runs right up to essentially the top bank of that ditch. And also the overhead electric runs right along the edge here as well, and you've got underground electric that runs to the back of the property here. So they came with this plan showing, trying to stay away from the electric utilities, that landscaping, which is actually down in the ditch. As soon as the surveyor office saw that, they said, nah, that's not going to work. This was overgrown before and stopped working effectively, had to be cleaned out by the city. They would hate for more landscaping to be put in there and actually run into an issue again in the future where this is blocking flow of water through here. So we're really running a situation where there is no space along this new parking area to put landscaping in. So actually, we're working with the applicant on an additional solution here, and that's what the request is tonight, to request relief from the parking lot perimeter landscaping requirement along this new parking area. But what we worked out with the applicant is, instead of putting landscaping along that new perimeter, what we've asked for them to do is provide parking lot perimeter landscaping around the front of the existing parking lot, which is obviously much more visible from Hendricks Drive. So rather than landscaping that new parking area, we've asked them to landscape the existing parking area as an alternative. So they, in terms of a hardship here, there is, based on where the building's located, where this parking's located, and the requirement for parking depth, and also the drive aisle, there really is literally no space to put landscaping in along this perimeter. So we've asked them to move it and then request the relief from the parking lot perimeter landscape requirement for this back. So that is the request is before you tonight, is for relief from the parking lot perimeter landscaping requirement. For the record, we have responded to all three criteria for findings of fact for approval of a variance request. And staff recommendation would be approval of the development standards variance request and permit relief from the parking lot perimeter landscape requirement, subject to the following recommendation or the following condition: that the applicant install parking lot perimeter landscaping along the Hendricks Drive frontage of the existing parking lot and 20 feet down both the east and west sides of that parking area. So in essence, you would have parking lot perimeter landscaping, if they want to go ahead and pull that up again, essentially from this point here, wrapping around the front and then wrapping down the side actually probably about 2 parking spaces down the side. So you kind of be about from here, wrapped around to here. With that, be happy to answer any questions.
That abuts to the school parking lot, right?
Yeah, the school parking lot is on the other side of the ditch.
That's what I thought.
And just for the record, the school parking lot has no parking lot perimeter landscaping either.
That's what I thought.
Other questions? Thank you. Does the applicant want to add anything?
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Posick. I'm here on behalf of the applicant and architect. I'm with Civil Environmental Consultants, 530 East Ohio Street, Indianapolis, Indiana. And we are the site designers on the project, so the civil engineers and landscape architect in our office working on these plans. Yeah, just wanted to add, I think Ben summarized it thoroughly, but a similar landscape design would be on that frontage with low perimeter shrubs to screen the current parking that's there, and the additional street trees as well. There's currently no landscaping out on the frontage, so it will enhance the curb appeal. And again, the reasoning for this is, as Ben mentioned, the hardships on the side perimeter with the ditch and power lines. So that's the reasoning there. We will provide other landscaping in other areas of the site, such as near the trash enclosure, to also just further enhance the appeal of the improvements being made on the property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, it's a public meeting. Anybody from the audience care to step forward? Close the public end of the meeting. Any further questions? If not, motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve docket 22-8 with a stipulation of, one, that the applicants install parking lot perimeter landscaping along the Hendricks Drive frontage of the existing parking lot and 20 feet down both the east and the west sides.
Second motion.
Kelly?
Mark Vanneman.
Aye.
Chad Kiger.
Aye.
Bruce Pelly.
Aye.
Ron Edwards.
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Congratulations, motion passed. Okay, do we have any other business tonight? Anybody have anything? Okay, I'll adjourn, but our next board meeting will be on Monday, March the 7th, 7 PM in this room here. Yeah, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.